Hello and welcome to another arc review for My Hero Academia. I'm Oceaniz and I'm once again joined by my very special friend, Ian. Hi Ian, how are you doing?
Hey man, dude, I'm so glad to be back talking about My Hero, actually talking about it in order, as you should.
Yeah, so before we jump in, obviously here's what we're doing. Today we're actually starting off with the early arcs of MHA and reviewing those. Now, what do we mean by early arcs? Pretty much everything that was in season 1 of the anime. So from the beginning, chapter 1, all the way to the All Might versus Nomu fight, and like the little stuff after that. And yeah, so if any of you are from the other episodes, you know the drill. Long talk, settle in, get something to drink. If you're new, buckle up, get something to drink.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Use the chapter selection because it was actually funny because my IRL friend today, he mentioned that he started watching the episode on the war arc. And I was like, oh, did you finish? And he's like, I watched like a little bit, but it was too long. And I'm like, but it has chapters. And he's like, yeah, but every chapter is like 40 minutes long. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll give you that one.
Why did you spend 20 minutes talking about Mount Lady?
But yeah, so this is the gist. Ian, as we discussed before we started, we wanted to begin by talking about our experiences with the anime, actually, which is decidedly not the manga. But for a little background, we both obviously started with the anime, with season 1 that aired in 2016. So, Ian, why don't you tell us about how you really got into it and what season 1 meant to you and how it like influenced your perception of this?
Yeah, so going back with my experience with My Hero Season 1, I think I was watching a Rebel Taxi Pizza Party podcast video where he basically just does a little roundup of like, here's 5 shows you might not have heard of. Oh, how wrong he would be later with My Hero's popularity. But but basically just being like, oh, here's this, this interesting show. And some of my friends had seen it too. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Watching through it, I was entirely the MHA, a straw man, basically. I was entirely that. I thought Deku was a big dumb crybaby, and I hate him. I thought All Might was raw and cool, and it was nice when he punched the Nomu. I hated everything having to do with the school stuff. Basically, and as far as Shigaraki, I was like, dude, this villain literally just wants to destroy stuff. That's so boring. Who even cares? Nothing's gonna come of this. Basically every opinion that I have grown to mock and scrutinize, I was that person. And I remember distinctly when season 2 was airing, basically seeing on my monitor my friend watching season 2, and it was during the cavalry battle, and I was like, no way I'm watching this. They're doing school stuff after we just got introduced to the villains. Who even cares? So So, very different from who I am now. I did not acknowledge Deku's name. Instead, I called him Jake Schlong as a reference to Jake Long because of his red and his black and green hair. So, basically, all of my opinions of season 1 are bad. I have nothing good to say about it in terms of my first experience. It was only once it eventually clicked in season 2, which we'll get to once we finally get to those arcs, that I immediately, retroactively was like, oh my gosh, this is one of my favorite stories ever, huh? But as far as first read-through and first watching of it, the only thing that really stood out to me was, of course, the All Might versus Nomu fight, but otherwise, I cared for 0% of the characters, except for All Might. And that's my opinion of my second favorite series of all time.
Yes, my 10 out of 10 uwu perfect baby series. Everything sucks except All Might.
Yeah, because he's raw and cool, and that was all I cared about. And he goes, oh ha ha ha, and I go, you funny man.
You were basically like, I recognize him. That's a JoJo character right there.
That's my guy. But yeah, so that's me, very, very humble beginnings, I'd say, maybe even the gutter.
Well, you turned out fine.
I hope.
My origin story with MHA is obviously on the channel. I made a video on that before, but to quickly recap, basically, I was ill and I had a lot of time to kill because I couldn't do sports because of a heart disease. And at the time, to kill that time, I basically just started watching a whole bunch of AniTube. And there was this Dragon Ball video game YouTuber who many of you may know, Rhymestyle, very cool person, and he reviewed the first episode of My Hero Academia. I don't even know if that video is still up. I searched for it recently, but I think he took it down.
Oh.
And he was like, oh yeah, this is a cool show, and we've been waiting for an anime adaptation for a while. I'm like, huh, that's cool. Let me check out episode 1. And I watched episode 1, and I was like, huh, this is kind of cool. And I watched episode 2, and I got to the scene where, All Might and Deku have their little moment under the sunset, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna love this series, huh? So I was pretty immediately enchanted, but it took another long time before I really, really got into it, because for the longest time I was like, I'm vibing with the feels, I'm vibing with the emotionality of this, but everything else is kind of flat. Like, I couldn't remember most of the classmates or anything. I kind of very much saw MHA as a collection of moments. Like, the sunset scene was a thing, and his first fight against Bakugo was a thing, and the fight with the Nomu was a thing. But that was kind of it.
But the moment to moment was pretty take it or leave it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even when I rewatched season 1 with like friends, and even to this day when I do it, I keep forgetting about the fucking episode where Ida
becomes class rep.
Yeah, where he like does the emergency exit pose. Yeah, like I still keep forgetting about that because it's so kind of unremarkable. Mm-hmm. And it did actually take until the Todoroki fight in season 2 for me to really get into it.
Same.
Yeah, because like the Todoroki fight happened, and then obviously after the sports festival arc, the series went on a break for 2 weeks, the anime, and in those 2 weeks I just read the entire manga because I couldn't wait. And that was kind of it.
Yeah, I think honestly, while I more favorably look upon this section, I do actually still think that general sentiment is still true. That it is mostly a series of really, really great moments, but the moment to moment is pretty just like it's here, And I think actually my enjoyment of it has only increased because I know the characters. But I totally understand why so many people, if you didn't get attached to Deku, or Bakugo maybe even, that you would just be like, it's whatever. It's like your standard shonen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, basically, you just need to have one character to attach yourself to. And that's something that's happened with every single person I've forced my hero onto so far. I have one friend who immediately attached themselves to All Might, and were like, I want to see more of him. I have my girlfriend who immediately attached herself to Ida, and wanted to see more of him. I had another friend who, the most recent guy, who literally, he only kept watching past episode 5 because of Aizawa, because he thought he was funny. So, it was, there's like a character for everyone, but if you happen to be one of the few people whose character doesn't get a lot of shine in season 1, well, I can totally understand that season 1 wouldn't be up your alley. I mean, if you call it bad, you're wrong, because that's not the opinion I have, and mine are the only one that are correct, obviously.
Go ahead.
I understand. It's, as far as the start goes, I think it's decently strong if it manages to resonate with you. But if it's maybe one of the starkest examples of, if it doesn't resonate, you're almost definitely not getting much out of it. Like, it's not something like, if it's not something like Jujutsu Kaisen or Attack on Titan, right? Where even if you don't resonate with anything, you're getting, a very strong action show or a cool, mysterious setup. My hero is very, very much just like, oh, I hope you feel these emotions.
Yeah, it very much wants you to attach to the characters, and the only real pitch, because the villain pitch isn't really even in the series either, because the title's Academia, obviously. So all you really need to, the only things that can really grab you with, as far as like a baseline, is, do I want to see more Sky High?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Which, so do you want to see kids learn about superpowers, and that's it. Because even this early on, the kind of the nuances and the things that makes quirks so great, the psychological aspect, the physical aspect, all those things are not really obvious. And
Mm-hmm.
so even that, I think, is not something that you can attach to, really, unless you specifically catch it. Like, because I was thinking about this with I was watching this podcast about this guy, and he was talking about what stories tell you to care about. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and he was asking it in relation to like nitpicks and plot holes. It's like, well, if the story doesn't spend a bunch of time talking about how the time travel works or how the science mumbo jumbo works, then that is the story telling you, don't worry about it. But if it
Mm-hmm.
spends 20 minutes explaining it and then it doesn't make sense, you should have the right to be like, you screwed this up big time. And with My
Mm-hmm.
Hero, what it tells you to care about is it says, care about Deku. And a lot of people don't like Deku, at least this early on, and for a lot of time. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you're not invested in Deku, or at the very least his relationship to All Might, like the idea of like, oh, I don't like Deku, but I like seeing All Might bring up this annoying kid, maybe in their eyes, to be a great hero, then you really will just be lost this first season in terms of what to enjoy, because you might see all these other kids and be like, oh, I want to see all their fights, skipped. Because the
Mm-hmm.
story is very utilitarian in that aspect, in that it's like, no, we are focusing on the main character, we are fleshing out his relationship to his rival and to his mentor, and that is the story. And I think that's ultimately the best way to do it, but it is
Mm-hmm.
also a very specific way to do it. There's nothing really broad, I feel like, about what My Hero is asking you to attach to. Like you said, there's no mystery, there's nothing kind of vague, really. It's really just saying, are you interested in this kid becoming a great hero? That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think that the pieces of the later nuance that shine through in in these early parts, they don't feel like nuanced elaborations on the world. They kind of feel like shonenisms. And
okay.
my favorite example of that is how season 1 and how this early part of the manga explains Bakugo's character and explains like why he is the way he is. Because
Mm.
in hindsight, that is a very clear indication of how, the failure of society to teach kids about their quirks impacts their personal development, and how, leaving people into their delusions makes them worse in the long run. Because obviously Bakugo is literally just a child who's gifted, who's told he is destined for greatness, and then comes up against the realization that, other people are great too. Like, that's a very interesting and nuanced way to do a power system. But because it's kind of isolated, because it only happens with Bakugo in this season, and because of how it is presented, especially in the anime, with Bakugo being incredibly overdramatic about it, it
And
kind of
the
feels...
voice acting adding to it with like the yelling.
Yeah, it kind of feels more like just, oh, that's his hashtag shonen backstory. And
Yes,
that's why
okay.
he is.
I'm glad you felt this too, because I was like, is this just the translation? Is it blah blah blah? I kind of feel like if like I was gonna give myself crap about like, oh, you didn't understand Bakugo back then, isn't it so obvious? I'm like, I still don't think it's that obvious that his character was gonna be anything more than what's presented here. Like, because the stuff we're given about how he's like, oh, he's been told he's awesome all his life, is his group of friends who are a bunch of children, and then one teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there wasn't enough to like make me sympathize with that angle. I have a friend who, to this day, he's like, literally, how is it possible to like Bakugo? He is so terribly written for so long, and he's he's like, he's such a terrible person. How is it possible to like have any amount of good retcon it? And so, just like for a lot of people, they felt that way about just kind of the blunt force at which Horikoshi kind of, like you said, gives him like his little backstory.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even really come across, I think, when he cries, like at the end, like, oh, that's some humanity in him or something. Like it just kind of feels like, oh, the angry boy's upset that he got put down. Good.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that has to do both with Hori's inexperience and characterization at this point in time, and how much that has to do with the anime, because the anime obviously, I'm just gonna go out and be an arrogant dickhead here. I'm gonna venture most people who talk about MHA in any capacity have not actually read the beginning in the manga and have actually just
Yeah.
watched it, because the anime, blew up so crazy big.
Yeah.
And we'll get into comparing the anime into the manga very shortly because that is actually one of the topics on our list. Um, but yeah, so I think for most people, their impressions were colored by the anime's depiction of Bakugo. And I think the anime made Bakugo seem a lot more unreasonable overall. Like, he seemed much more feral. Which, to an extent, you can say it's the studio and the animators kind of having fun with him, which is always a nice thing to see. But the side effect of that is, of course, that you lose
What
out
happened?
on you lose out on a bit of that humanity. Like, season 1 Bakugo is basically a barking chihuahua. Like, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the fascinating thing to me is that I have seen people who are anime only who they understood Bakugo by episode 2, or they understood Bakugo in his fight and they could analyze it perfectly. And I'm like, there's got to be something here that people are connecting to. Are they connecting to the idea of, like, everyone tells you you're great and you have this power? Are they maybe so disinterested in Deku that now that there's a character with any bit of nuance, they're like, oh, this is my guy, right? And so they can kind of attach to him a bit easier? Because I have legitimately seen, like, multiple people who just, like, get Bakugo really early, and even now, going back to it for this reread, I do not think that, like, there's a couple of characters here who I was like, oh man, I can track their progress into who they became. I still feel like if I read this, or reading this now, that I don't see the Bakugo we have now. And I'm not saying that that's, like, that Hori didn't make it natural, like, that he didn't do a good job making Bakugo come out of this. But I think it has a similar impression that people get from Endeavor, where it's like you went so hard on how terrible they are that when you start to add nuance, you've already put them at negative for me, that they can only work themselves up to neutral and maybe just that.
Yeah. Like, I definitely get that. But okay, since we're already starting to talk about, like, the characters themselves, maybe we want to move on from our experience with season 1 and into comparing the anime with the manga, just real quick.
Yeah,
Unless you have
for it.
anything else specific about season 1 that you want to mention.
I guess I would just say that I actually do really like it now. Like, I think it has some great directing. I think episode 1 and 2 are pretty flawless. And of course, the anime just exploded the All Might versus Anomu fight into a legendary moment that it is not in the manga, which
yes.
we can transition in now into
Okay.
the manga.
Okay, so I have my problems with the My Hero Academia anime, especially now, the later seasons. But season 1, while it is, in a lot of ways, very bland shonen, unseasoned chicken breast, it has its moments, and obviously it really elevates the beginning of the story and the end of that season, like, massively. Because, oh boy, the manga is really weird at times. Like, I don't want to say it's flat or, like, confusing, but it definitely does not have the flow and the natural, like, sequentiality that the anime has. Because in the anime, it manages to tie all these arcs together in a way that does not feel super stupid. Like, we basically have, 4 or 5 story arcs that are completely separate, aside from just being tied down to, it's a school setting. He wants to go to school, but he can't. He wants to go to school, but he has to pass an exam. He is at school, he has to prove himself. He is at school, he has to defeat his bully. And he is at school, and villains are attacking. Like, those are very, like, disconnected. Just
Very episodic.
Yeah, but the anime makes it feel like grander than it is, and I feel it really benefits from that. Like, the anime season just flows so much better than the manga. The manga feels very stop and go. It feels very much, here's a thing, okay, that was that. Here's a thing, okay, that was that. So...
Yeah, if I could give an example, unless you have something else to say.
No, you go.
Yeah, so what I was going to mention is specifically the scene where it's after Bakugo has lost the fight, and Deku walks into the room, and he's, like, talking to all his classmates or whatever, and then in the manga, or in the anime, he kind of, like, walks around, he's like, hey, or he sees the desk, and he's like, hey, where's Bakugo? And then people kind of, like, stop and look down, and then they're just like, well, he kind of just left, and then it kind of gives this air of, like, oh, is he quitting? Is he, like, what's going on? What's he doing? But in the manga, you see Deku walks in, you just see his hair, and then it's a bunch of characters talking to him. Then you have this tiny little panel. This is the first time we see Deku on this page, and this is him returning. And then he's just like, not quite. I'm pretty worn out. So, Uraraka, sorry I have to. Shot of the school. And then the next page is him outside yelling Kachan at Bakugo.
Mm-hmm.
And it says like in like a basically like a flashback thought bubble. Everyone wanted to talk to me, but just clammed up and went. He just clammed up and went home. And it's like it's so jarring, like because this obviously immediately just jumps into him being like, "This is my power," blah 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 blah. And it just, I don't know, it feels very like jarring, like, oh, we're here. Okay, now we're outside.
Yeah. Like, it's definitely, I want to say it's growing pains. Like, it feels like Hori just didn't know how to connect events. Like, because my biggest example, which I've mentioned on Twitter, I feel I've mentioned on this show before, is when Aizawa gets his head smashed in and saves Tsuyu in the meantime. Like, in the anime, they make it such a, like, big moment where it's like, you know, the Shigaraki's hand is moving towards her, Deku is trying to save her, everything is going bad, and then nothing happens, and Shigaraki's like, oh, you're so cool, Eraserhead. And, you know, shot to Aizawa.
And the music kicks in, and it goes,
yeah,
and then he gets slammed to the ground.
Yeah, but like in the manga, it's like my reaction still stands. It feels like panels are missing. It genuinely feels like there are just transitionary pictures that aren't there. And to a certain extent, you could say, oh, you know, that's what animation is there for. But, you know, this was a manga before it was an anime. Like for 2 whole years, MHA only existed as a manga. And as a manga, sequences like these just don't feel good. They don't feel nice to read. They don't feel clear in what they're communicating. So, yeah, no. When it comes to, like, flow of action and flow of story, the anime definitely elevates the manga quite significantly.
And I wanted to ask you this since we had talked about joint training. I know you had some problems with either like panel size or something like that, or getting lost, I think, in joint training. I definitely felt lost in this fight with Bakugo and Deku, and it did really, like, I do think the joint training is, like very, very good in terms of that, by comparison. I don't know how you felt about that. Did you feel like you still saw some of those same issues here, or do you think that by joint training he's kind of gotten past them? But when you were reading this, did you feel any difference in comparison?
I didn't really actively think of like a comparison between those, but now that you do mention it, I did feel that a lot of the fighting panels in these early sections feel cramped. Like, it feels that Hori is kind of scared of letting his drawings breathe. And I don't know why that would be, because clearly he has a lot of confidence in his art. I mean, look at how chapter 1 looks. Like, that shit's full of spreads. So, you know, it's interesting why that would be the case. But yeah, I agree that there definitely is, like, a certain, whatchamacallit, like, claustrophobia especially in the fighting panels. Like, I mean, if you just look at something like, you know, All Might Nuking the Nomu, that's just completely not... It feels cramped. Again, it just does not feel correct. Especially now that we have, you know, the anime version in our minds. You'd think that him sending the Nomu into the stratosphere would be such a massive moment. But comparatively, it's very mundane.
Yeah, it does feel really mundane, and I've talked to a few people, and again, maybe this really is just like our bias, but like every time someone goes through the manga and they read that, I always try to ask them, like, did you feel like the weight of All Might's punch, or do you feel like he's really strong? And I've had some people say they're like, oh yeah, dude, heck yeah, and they haven't seen the anime, so I'm like, maybe it did come across. Like, it's really hard for me to separate the crazy fight from season 1 with literally a spread of All Might's eyes, tiny panels of him punching, and Deku being like, oh, he's going 100%, and then the plus ultra punch, he's out, that's it.
Yeah, because also, like, I'm looking at it again right now. Like, you don't even get to see All Might wind up in any real fashion. Like, you see him wind up in a tiny panel, and then in the spread, you have the side panel where, like, you don't even see All Might's hand. It looks like he's gently pushing the Nomu.
Yeah, you don't feel the impact.
Yeah, like, I mean, the aftermath is very cool and strong,
Yes,
but
yes.
it's just, yeah, it definitely does not feel like it got enough time to breathe. And like, I can't in this case, and I know I'm sure we're gonna get comments about this one. In this case, I think it's down to Hori wanting it to feel like All Might just overpowers him immediately. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh, when All Might pushes himself, he immediately wins. But it just does not feel right. It feels so cramped. And yeah, now that I'm looking over this chapter again, just scrolling through, Hori really loved doing tiny panels that convey way too much action.
I know. I'm looking at him fighting the Nomu, and I'm
Yeah.
looking at like when he dodges or when he like grabs him for a suplex, and it's so tiny. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you don't feel like these are two behemoths fighting, and I also don't feel like the manga properly portrayed how strong the Nomu was.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing, and I actually used to give the anime crap for this, but it was actually a very smart decision. So in the scene where Deku punches Shigaraki, but then the Nomu blocks it, right?
Yeah.
And then it creates this giant shockwave. It knocks out like lights and blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
That's not supposed to happen because because you saw what he did was he punched and his arm didn't break, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
way his power works isn't that if I think about using 100% correctly, my body can do it. It's that your body's too weak, so it can't handle 100% ever. So when the anime does that and they say that it's a 100% punch, they're wrong because in the manga there is no shockwave, there is no like anything crazy like that. He just punches and then he's like, "Oh, I accidentally held back and controlled it." And then later they establish in Sports Festival that was probably a 5% punch. But the anime makes it basically seem like there's this super secret 100% attack that Deku can do when he thinks he's going to kill you but wants to hold back just enough that he won't break his arm by also using 100% anyway, so that doesn't make any sense. But like but like the anime doing that builds up this anticipation where you're like, "Oh my gosh, Deku did 100% punch and he didn't break his arm. Look how cool he is." And then the Nomu's just standing there and he grabs his arm, you're like, "That didn't do anything?" And so when All Might shows up, you're like, "Oh god." He's like, "What's going to happen?" Whereas I think in the manga it doesn't come across that way at all. It just feels like All Might's here. And then he punches a little bit. There are these very tiny panels. And then he's like, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." And then he does. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I guess that was that.
Yeah, like looking through a lot of these pages again, man, Hori does not. It's almost like he doesn't follow up on his actions a lot. Like I'm looking at when All Might first appears. His appearance after like the big spread where he rips his
Which is gorgeous, by the
which
way.
is
I do
so cool.
Yeah, I do want to say real quick, the character art, well, like we talked about, like sometimes it's a bit flat at times. It gets drastically better really quick, and stuff like this, like All Might always looks amazing with his like distinct art style. When he wants to do character motions, he's very good at it. It's just not constant, and that's where kind of the breakup comes from. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so when he appears, you get a tiny panel of All Might dropping his jacket, another reaction panel of two villains reacting, and the next one is All Might having gone past the villains, beaten all of them, and like his arm being like in a swooshing motion. And like, I get it, this is supposed to like convey his speed, but it does not feel like a sequence. It feels like I'm reading like a storyboard of moments that are to happen at a relatively decent time difference between each other. And like there's so much of this, especially in this arc. Like
when he's holding Aizawa and it's this like you'll see it, this tiny panel. He's like his arm, his face. It's like you don't feel like Aizawa's, because I know in the anime he's like, "Thank you, Aizawa. I'm so sorry I'm late." And you actually see Aizawa, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, look how much work he put in." But in this, it's just like, "All right, you've done your part. Get outside, character."
Yeah, it's really just not very good. Like I genuinely believe the anime elevated this so much. And because you mentioned character art, let's actually talk about character art a little bit.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Because people tend to say that they really like Hori's like early art style. Like I see that a lot, that people say that his newer art style is a bit weird. faces look blobby and sort of dumb, yeah. Sort of dumb. And while I do agree with those criticisms, I don't think I prefer the earlier art style because, yes, All Might looks amazing. Deku looks really good sometimes. But a lot of these characters just look like water hoses a lot of the time. Like, they look so flaccid and deflated. And I know that was Hori's art, very much Hori's, like, trademark art style for a long time, especially if you, like, find, like, Wayback Machine pages of his old blogs where he posted fan art of stuff. You can really see that was his art style. Like, that was his vision. Like, he drew like Pokemon in that art style. And you can really see he loves making them look like they're very elongated. You know, perhaps that is that One Piece influence coming in because, of course, his very first step onto the scene was as a One Piece fan artist. But man, it does not look right sometimes. It does not look right sometimes.
I distinctly remember. Real quick, I was going to give an example. Real quick, when I said dumb, I meant they're dumb. I adore Hori's new style. They're dumb for saying that. I need to clarify. Anyway, no, I agree with you. I remember specifically. There's a shot of Bakugo as soon as Deku shows off his power for the first time, and it just looks like Hori drew his face, stretched it, and there's like it's so flat looking and weird, and it's just like, what is happening? And I think a lot of the characters look that way. I sent you a comparison shot, for example, of Chapter 8 whenever they show all the kids about to do the bomb test, and they all just look so flat. Their character models look a bit like weird and stuff. But then you go to Chapter 21, and he really has improved. Like, he improves very quickly. Like, I think, like, we hit, like the Hori we all know and love, and then he gets better from, like once we hit Stain, like, it's just glorious from then on, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I would even say, like, halfway through Sports Festival, you start getting, like, that classic good Horikoshi art.
Yeah. So it doesn't take long, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely noticeable.
Yeah. Because also, Hori's first 2 or 3 color pages, they're god-awful. Like, the one where the color page of him, of Deku gearing up to punch Bakugo, that one is straight up terrible. Like, I'm sorry, nothing looks good in that one. Like, the colors, the colors are really wrong. Like, if you go onto the MHA wiki, they might have it. Because it's really hard to find these color pages in color. If you're an English-speaking fan. But yeah, let me see. He should... yeah, a lot of his early color pages just do not look right. Yeah, wait, I found it.
Alright, can you send it to me, please?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's the color page for Chapter 9. I don't know, did it send? No, it did not.
Yeah, it did.
Oh, it did? Oh, well, now here it's twice. Yeah,
I like that guy.
That one is so bad. I hate it so much. It's easily my least favorite one. And I think, like, even, like, the first, like, spread, like, which is the first spread of the series, and it's very, very colorful, and I do like the colors in it, I still think it does not compare to how good he looks now. Like, this one is still very good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Chapter 1, like, when we get to the positives, I think Hori put, like, his heart and soul into Chapter 1, because it stands head and shoulders above everything else that's in this section of the story, which is good. But, yeah, I agree. It's a bit too, like, cluttered in certain places.
Because also, let me see, there is one other color page that I detest. And, like... Oh god, there we go. It's not a color page, it's an alternative volume cover. And like a lot of sites use it as their like cover for MHA, and I hate it so much. This is
that looks terrible.
This is maybe my least favorite Horikoshi drawing in existence. And I will also say, I have long since had a suspicion that early Horikoshi outsourced a lot of his additional art to his assistants. because
I think so.
Because there is a specific like merch illustration that Hori made, allegedly, which does not look like him whatsoever, and I need to find it. I'll probably be looking for it for the rest of this because I don't know what it is for. Like, my sister has it hung in her room, so I see it a lot. But it's like it's the one where you see like all the characters flying basically to the left, and it has like All Might looks completely wrong. Let me see. Is it a color page? I can't remember.
What I do want to say about this, so I agree 100% on this last one. The middle one I think looks fine. Like, I think there's some weirdness kind of with Deku's hair, but that's just mostly the early art style. I will go to bat for this first one just because I actually like the blockiness of it, and I like the fact that the page is breaking, like it's shattering, and that like the smoke kind of merges into it, and I like that there's no like line work or anything. So I actually think like stylistically I really enjoy it. But I can agree with you on this last one. I think like the faces look so wrong.
Yeah, they're just so. Like,
What is it about the? I mean, because I think with art criticism, like so far we've just kind of been like, it looks dumb. What do you specifically dislike about this first one, if I may ask? Because I think a lot of people do like this one.
I really hate Deku's facial proportions in this one. Okay. Like, he always has bug eyes. That is just his character design, and I'm fine with that. But something about the combination between the bug eyes, a non-existent nose, the giant toothy fleshy grin, and like his waving pastel-y hair just looks so off to me.
Okay.
And then like you go to Bakugo and he looks like his face, he looks like he has a snout. Which, admittedly, that is MHA's art style. Everyone does have a bit of a snout. Like, especially in the anime, like they literally just have like a J in their profile. But here I feel like it's just not very good. It's just very pronounced. And I'd also like, if you look at it, it's very sort of, it's very wispy. Like, a lot of the colors and a lot of the color areas are painted in what I would consider a sort of like a first color layer sort of style. Like, there's very few like distinct, strong, bold outlines. Like, if you look at Deku's open hand, that one just looks a bit too messy for me.
Okay. Here's what I will say. It's very stylized. I just happen to dig the style a lot. Like, I always think it's really fun whenever, like, for example, Yutaka Nakamura, he's just like, oh, the character designs of the characters, screw it, I'm doing what I want. And he'll just, like, elongate all their faces and, like, squash and stretch them and make them look, like, ridiculous. But I really like that because it's like, oh, I wouldn't have thought to draw them this way. So I actually am a fan of the fact that Deku's like this toothy grin boy, and then Bakugo has like these sharp razor teeth like he's a shark. And like, I don't know, for me it just works, but I understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a matter of taste at the end. And I do think composition-wise, this is a very strong page.
Yeah.
Although, I will offer one last bit of hate on that one. I think this one was drawn knowing that it was going to have a bunch of like additional text over it, because if you remove the Japanese text behind it and if you clean it but leave it the same size, the like upper third is so empty. It's kind of, and this is very much a nitpick because obviously this is made for a magazine. You would draw it like that, but especially if you look at his later color pages, you start noticing he stops caring as much about that stuff. Like, later on, his characters cover so much of the area that would later be overtaken by text, which is, both a good and a bad thing. Good for, like, general composition, terrible for anyone who wants to clean the page. But, that's neither here nor there.
Well, kind of like even with this recent Dabi cover, where like the way they sell it to you is the My Hero Academia logo is red, but the way Hori drew it is that it's blue, so it blends in with the fire, and so that to me, I'm like, I love that, but I understand why. Like, that's where like this distinction is, where it's like before it seems like he's working with those things, and then now it's like, hey, I'm gonna do this, you either fix it or it's just looking like this.
Yeah, basically. Also, I found the drawing I was talking earlier about. It's the cover of the first Ultra Archive. And I am 100% sure this was not drawn by Horikoshi. It just looks like someone imitating his style, but it just looks off.
Do you think it's the coloring? Because usually Horikoshi colors a little differently. This kind of looks really flat.
Yeah. That, and also look at All Might. Like, he does not look as stylized as he usually
doesn't have
is.
enough shading. Yeah.
Basically. Like, he looks like he's drawn in the same art style as the other characters, which is never the case when it's Hori.
Well, and it's also not good because, for example, I have this All Might figure on my desk, and I call it Bizarro All Might. Basically like Bizarro Superman or whatever, because the problem is that his face is like pitch white and they didn't do any shading. So when you have a man with black hole eyes and a giant gaping grin holding children, it doesn't look very heroic. So this kind of reminds me of Bizarro All Might, where like you have to have the shading in order to make it work.
Yeah,
because otherwise All Might does look like scary and weird and off-putting.
Yeah, and like, for example, I think Bakugo looks very Horikoshi, but then look at Ida, and Ida's entire, like, physicality just looks off.
So stiff.
Yeah, which, like, you know, it is Ida, but still, that is, like, the kind of stiff I would attribute to not being intentional.
Yeah, by the way, I'm so happy that you also retweeted the Mina is your daughter picture, because she's the best.
You know what? I'm not going to comment on that because I did not retweet that for wholesome reasons.
I know, but you know, I gotta meet you halfway someday.
That's okay. That's okay. All right. So we've talked a fair bit about like the art and paneling and the pacing critique. Do we want to get into like the characters and their initial present representations, or is there anything else you wanted to burningly talk about before we get into that?
Let me see here. Not really. I think just overall, as far as, because now we're gonna, I think, mostly just getting into positives. I think just overall, this is just a case of, like, yeah, like even your favorites have to start somewhere, and they're not always gonna, like, start off just being consistently great. Maybe sometimes they do. But I think with MHA, even in the manga, what I always get a sense for is the heart behind it. And of course, maybe you won't resonate with that. Like we talked about, it's very much, I don't think it's a flaw of the series, but Horikoshi focusing so hard on just like, here's Deku, you're either in or you're out. Do you like him or not? If you are like me, then that really hits. And I love that for the series, that it did decide, yeah, there's all these characters, but no, we're not gonna get bogged down in the weeds of things. This is Deku's story. We're going to spend so much time with him. And I think that eventually he rewards you with that because, like we've talked about before, we've gotten to the point where Deku is only now recently becoming the main character after, like, almost 100 chapter gap. Not because he wasn't in it, but because the story has moved so far beyond him that so many other side characters can stand head and shoulders. And I don't think Deku would have that space to breathe if he started doing that from the start. And so I just wanted to say that while I do have some critiques about like things not maybe being as interesting, probably because he's just focusing on one character, and so when he does focus on the Ida chapter, or maybe a little bit showing the other kids, or like Bakugo, who hasn't been fully kind of characterized, it can kind of just feel like, okay, yeah, this is, you know, we're just reading a shonen. But I think it paid off long term, and so I am content with what he did, even if I do think, sure, maybe his art could have punched it up a little more, because the anime certainly did. So I don't think it's a problem of what he chose to focus on. I think it's just a matter of the art and paneling not being able to uphold that simple concept as well as he can do now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. While you were talking, it also popped into mind, like, Hori probably, to a certain extent, also really just wanted to front-load you with the Deku, uwu, care for me, please vibes, because he didn't know he was going to even make it past chapter 30. Because, I mean, here you have a man who got cancelled really quickly twice in a row and was now sitting on his final chance. Like, I can imagine him just being, okay, I just want to get to the point of what my series will be about, like the central feeling I want to convey. And if I'm still around by chapter 30, fine, we can do like a full story. Like, I'm wondering if that might have been some of the sentiment behind it.
Yeah, and I guess, finish up.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, with weekly manga, it's just always important to remember, none of these stories start out knowing that they're going to be this long. They always start out thinking, okay, I'm going to do 2 story arcs, and then hopefully I'm not cancelled. And you know, Kishimoto famously never had more than 8 chapters planned out, and like vague outlines for the rest of his story, but he was always ready to just get cancelled. which is
Yeah.
hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's always good to just like take into account these authors, and I think with most art in general, not to get on my soapbox, but I always do just like trying to think about the time, place, and the people working on it, because like sure, I can like sit here and like complain about like it's not 10 out of 10 peak fiction for every chapter, but like dude, there's still like stuff that I'm enjoying throughout, and it eventually gets to that. And like sure, obviously some other people, they do just start out like full speed ahead and maybe can keep your attention, but I just always like to keep that in mind, especially with series I really love, because as we talked about when I asked you before we started this, I was like, oh, how did you feel? And you're like, I felt really nostalgic, like I really enjoyed my read through. And I'm sure like maybe some people might not think that based on what we've talked about.
Well, that's kind of the problem with MHA, especially with me. I've spent 3-4 years now talking about how good it is. I feel like a broken record if I just sit here and tell you, oh, but the themes are so good and Deku's characterization is really cool. Like you get,
of
like
course.
fellas, you got to give me some leeway. I the only thing that's left to talk about with MHA from my side now is the shitty stuff,
which I'm fine with. And hey, that's literally perfect, where we have to take the creator of this YouTube channel into account, and like all the videos you've made, it's like, dude, I need something to talk about. I know it's good, I love it, but
yeah. Like Jesus, I had already made like 3 hey, MHA is good, you idiots type videos before I was even monetized. So, like it's
you're definitely a bit of a fan.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I've definitely been falling out of it as of late. Like especially during this war arc, it really tested my it really tested how much I could dedicate myself to this series. And I definitely feel less into it now than I was before the war started. Which, is an unfortunate feeling, but that might be because of the series, that might be because stuff just happening in my own life and me becoming busier. So, that's neither here nor there.
And of course, there's just always time where like you're going back to Naruto right now, and you're like, I'm enjoying a lot of different characters or aspects that I didn't really appreciate back then. So, I mean, we're literally like in our 20s. Like, who knows how we'll feel about My Hero from now, good or bad. But
when I'm 80 and I'll I'll tweet onto Twitter version 3.0, damn, I can't believe Uraraka sucked. That's gonna hit.
It's gonna hit a bit. It's gonna hit a bit different, especially when it's, the final tweet.
My final words: Horikoshi, just give us a romance arc already, you stupid bastard.
And your grandkids are like, Grandpa, it ended like 30 years ago. It's like, no, you don't understand. There were so many lingering plot threads for her character. How does it connect? Where's the money? Where's the money?
Grandpa,
all right.
Grandpa, can you please tell us anything else? And I'm like, the 6 quirks reveal was bad.
Why is Bakugo from the future? Grandpa, we still don't know. That's the problem.
All right, I'm feeling it's time to move on to the next section. If we're already here, philosophizing about my final hours.
Yeah, no.
So, first character on the chopping block is All Might. Arguably the mascot of the series for a long time, like even more than Deku, which is interesting. Yeah, because I wonder how much of that was planned on Hori's part, because he clearly wanted to put a lot of stock into Deku, but All Might kind of immediately becomes the My Hero Academia character, like the one you remember. And it's interesting because it almost is meta-textual in a way, because it's like, Deku is supposed to be the face of this series, but All Might ends up being it because he's just more charismatic. Same way how Deku wants to be the, greatest hero, but at the time it is All Might. Like it's definitely an interesting little phenomenon that happened there, which I don't think anyone really planned, least of all Hori. But it's still pretty cool. But
I think, and continue.
No, I was literally just gonna give you the word.
So I was just gonna say that, definitely All Might, he fits into that kind of like Uncle Iroh spot from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where it's like he's written to be the most perfect likable guy. Like he has all the things you would want. He has an interesting, like, funny personality. He is cool. He's raw. He's got like some quirkiness about him, like with the way he's drawn. He's he's being set up against a whiny teenager who he is, his calm and cooler demeanor definitely elevates him even more because we're comparing him to the the child, and he's like, I am the big muscle man who saves everybody. It's like, yeah, he can punch the weather and change it. So like there's a lot of stuff to just attach to All Might, but of course that's regardless of the superficial stuff. I so love Chapter 1. I think it's, out of this whole thing, I still think Chapter 1 is like 10 out of 10. Like I love everything about it. It feels so weighty and meaty. And what I think holds it all together is All Might, and the fact that from the get-go, as soon as we see him in that little screen of Deku watching it on the computer, he comes out and he's smiling and he's laughing. And I was like, why does this not come off like condescending or like, who's this guy? Like, this is kind of weird. But I think it's the fact that he's bleeding. He has blood all over his face. He's suffering with you and he's carrying you out, and but he's still smiling. And that just like really got me on the reread. And it's a thing that persists through All Might this whole time, of like this perfect, indomitable character. And I think a lot of people probably compared him to like Superman, or at least the straw man version of Superman, where like, he's perfect, he does no wrong, he has no flaws, blah 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 blah. But so whenever you get the idea of like, oh, look at his tiny form, look at look at his scar, like it doesn't look cool or sexy, it's like not a sexy scar. He has like this gaping hole in his stomach and all that stuff, and he's just like, nah, the reason I smile is because I'm really scared and I'm kind of down on myself right now. Like, no, kid, you can't be here. I'm sorry. Just like deal with it. And like whenever he sees like, oh, he's screwed up and he's doubting himself and all this stuff, like it's really great, that juxtaposition. And I think what it does is it instantly gives you like a reason to care about him past the superficial so quickly. And I think that having that there and having him be also the power ceiling for Deku to reach, obviously this is more well conveyed in season 1 of the anime with like the Nomu fight, but being able to see him fight the Nomu and do all these things, you're like, that's what Deku is eventually gonna be. And so I think he just, 1, he functions so well, 2, he has such a good heart, and 3, he's just fun to look at. Like, I love, obviously, that he's drawn in a different style. As a Kingdom Hearts fan, I always love when 2 clashing things come together, but they interact and they're treated sincerely. Like, they're treated with either an amount of style or heart. And so, All Might just, all throughout this, he just has so many little character quirks or contradictions. He's the greatest hero, he's so cool and stuff, but he needs, like, a cheat sheet to teach a class. He's like, oh, young Midoriya, you need to be quiet and blah 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 and not yell at my name. But then he like transforms into All Might to like break a can, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's All Might. He's like, run, Midoriya. And so he's like an idiot at the same time. And there's just that, I don't know, there's so much layers to him. Whereas like Deku, he has layers, but it's all kind of like compounding on one idea. All Might has that classic, like, you want to give your character a contradiction so that you say like, oh, he's this, but he's also this, and he's also this, but this adds to this. And I just think overall, All Might just stands out so well, and especially when Hori goes all out and giving him those spreads of like, he's not smiling or he rips off his tie. You feel it. Like, I look up to All Might when I read it. I feel like, oh my gosh, look at this great hero. So great work.
Yeah, like I think with All Might, Hori did kind of strike gold when it comes to just making a character that is likable for like easy reasons. Because I think Deku is likable, but I definitely think there is a barrier of entry to being a cool kid and fundamentally accepting that Deku is actually great. Whereas with All Might, it's like, he's raw, he's funny, he looks like he's such a cool character design, he's so recognizable, he's ripped, which is always a plus, and he's like super strong and has an interesting like, flip side with his skeletal form. Like, All Might is so easy to like, and he's so easy to like in these early chapters especially, because he just feels almost like an outside force. He almost, in a way, feels like he doesn't even fit into the series in certain ways, just because of how different he is to everything else.
Which is kind of the point when he's this unimaginable standard that nobody can compete with.
Right.
Which is kind of, it's like you said, the meta, like, it's so crazy. The meta, like, inhabits the story and, like, reaches out of itself, too. It's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that part was probably intentional, though, because that's probably also the reason why he's drawn in a different art style. Because, like, from what one can gather from, like, reading Hori's old interviews and reading his manuscripts especially, he very early on decided he wanted All Might to be exceptional. to be someone that stands outside of the realm of the others. And you can see this in like his base sketches of All Might, where even when he drew him as like just an old man in a cape and like a Flash costume, he was still shaded in a completely different art style than everyone else. And it's interesting that was such an early decision by Horikoshi. And it makes me believe that contrast, that, juxtaposition was always going to be there. And I can really appreciate that. Like, that feels right.
And it gives a sincerity that, again, I think this whole My Hero just in general always has, which is why, like, even if I'm going to nitpick it, it's like, yeah, but I see the heart. Like, I see that this is a man who, like, loves to do this, which is the fact that, just that All Might is a reference to, obviously, like, older comic books and, like, kind of the dark inking and stuff. Like, he didn't have to do that, But the fact that he wanted to, and, like, like it's a lot of work, obviously, to draw him like that and not have to like have all this dark shading and think about like he needs to have like his own separate lighting. Like you feel the love that Horikoshi has for All Might, and I just wanted to read his behind the scenes description of it because I think it's really interesting. He says, first of all, he says, drawing a single frontal shot of him uses up 1 or 2 pen nibs. He's terrible for my fuel economy, which is just funny. But this is my favorite part. He goes, I thought he was really cool when I first drew him, but at the meeting with the editorial department, they said, who'd look up to this old guy? I don't want to be like him. And wouldn't he be better as a pretty boy? My manga buddy said, who's this weird, cheerful old dude? But this criticism only fanned my flames. Thanks to them, I now give it my all drawing him. So thanks for that, guys.
Aww.
And I'm like,
I think I remember that.
Yeah. So like, that's just so cool. Yeah, so I just think All Might is imbued with so much heart, so much, like you said, just like kind of easy appeal. And he's great. Like, I think if you don't like Deku, he holds the series together for most people. Like, I think if All Might didn't exist, people would have dropped season 1 because people hated Deku and people hated Bakugo. What they liked was All Might.
Yeah.
And and kind of Aizawa, I think.
Yeah, like, I would definitely say All Might is the glue that holds season 1 content together. Like, I would even venture to say the manga kind of stood on All Might's shoulders for a long time. Like, at least until the sports festival, because that's the first time you really get a sense of what Deku is capable of and where his character is headed. Because even just in the terms of, like, in the most basic level of, like, power progression. Because when you first start MHA and Deku's power is, like, revealed, I remember I was just like, okay, where is this gonna go? Because he just has a quirk now, but it's all powerful, but it breaks him. So what is this story going to be even about? And I feel like that sentiment kind of makes Deku unattractive for a long time until in the sports festival, he starts figuring out his fingers and he starts thinking, okay, for this fight, I have 10 fingers. And it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And after that, you get into shoot style and then you get the percentages and then you're in business,
Yeah, then people are like, oh, he can punch Stain and I don't have to be like, again, I'm not trying to mock these people because I have grown to learn, like, there are shows that I just watch because, like, oh, it looks cool and stuff. And, like, sure, there could be a deep character reason for it, but it's just not fun or whatever. So I understand why, for certain people, it's just not, they don't want to get into Deku because, like, sure, you've got, like, this heart or whatever, kid, but, like, what are you giving to me as just, like, a fun read, And if it's not the emotional side, which is kind of what Deku ultimately only provides, like you said early on, then they're just going to be checked out. And All Might provides that the escapism we all come to for these types of stories.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Like, All Might definitely carries MHA for a long time. But it's interesting because we talked about, like, the hindsight and going back to it. Like, on this reread, All Might did not carry it for me. Like, I was more interested in just seeing where these characters started. And I think it's just, again, this, like, Pandora's box that is opened once you get into, like, peak MHA content. Like, once you've hit stuff like Overhaul and stuff like,
Pro Hero, My Villain,
even just, the Hideout raid and the Forest arc. Like, all of those things, once you hit that, you kind of can't come back to the same mindset. When I read this early content, I'm not there like, oh, why are these characters here? I want to see more of the funny JoJo man.
I'm like, man, I love all these characters. This is cool where they started.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's interesting how much this changes. Like I definitely implore anyone who thinks that MHA's beginning is weak to just go and see for yourself if you still think that. Like perspective changes a lot, as do, 4 years. Um
I do want to say that I think that the anime version of All Might does keep that same gravitas. One, because of his theme song, which is very distinct. Two, because of his voice acting. And three, because of the character art being really good in season 1 for when he needs to do big things. So I actually do think that, again, this is just a failing of Horikoshi's like paneling and having all these smaller panels of All Might. He doesn't fill the space as much as he does in the anime. Whereas like in the anime, like he has the ha ha ha. Whereas like in the manga, you might not recognize, like, because I don't normally read like the little kanji on the side, right, where it's like, oh, boom or thoom, but like he does laugh, but it's never in like a speech bubble. It's just around his character. He'll say ha 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 ha. But like that's so iconic to his character, the ha ha ha.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
and so I think that if you're ultimately, what I'm going to say is that I think that the anime's better for this section of the story. like bar none. So I would say that if you do want to feel that same like love for All Might, go to the anime, because you will feel it. I think like it's just the music, the animation, all the stuff I mentioned. But in the manga, I did also feel like he's a bit smaller here. I'm still invested in Deku, but like honestly, I think I'm invested in Deku more than All Might in this early part, and not just because I know where Deku goes. I think also just by how the space is divvied out. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I definitely think also the additional voice acting, both in the Japanese as Kenta Miyake and the English Christopher Sabath, they really, really managed to sell All Might.
Elevate it, really.
Yeah. All right, so did you want to move on to our next character?
Yes, of course. So, do you want to start? Just because I started with All Might?
Sure. The next one is Deku, our main boy, who, in this early on, while he is very endearing, on this reread, I was like, man, you know what? I get what people dislike about him.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Because he is very meek, and he's very passive for a long time. And while, in my mind, I know, this is all a consequence of how he was treated, it is still hard to, like, stomach it when you're 3 chapters in and your main character is, like, has basically tried talking himself out of doing things for, like, the 5th time. Like, by the time you get to the exam and he's kind of doing nothing for most of it until he, like, gets his big moment, I can understand getting annoyed at him. But, that was very much a tangential feeling because overall I still love Deku.
Well, especially with the anime, you can hear him crying. There's a big difference between reading it and seeing it and hearing...
Yeah, exactly. Also, can I just say, I think here we again have the voice actors on both versions elevating it, but, to the bad effect. Because...
yeah.
Yeah, like Yamashita Daiki and Justin Briner both do Deku justice. The problem is doing him justice in these early chapters works to his detriment. But, I still think his presentation as a character, if you buy into him early on, is really satisfying. Like, you just see him essentially inching his way closer and closer to his goals and finding new and interesting ways to do that. And I think that that's really cool. Like, as far as a character, like a protagonist origin is concerned, chapter 1 and 2 are so strong. I really think that they do such a great job of just selling you on Deku. But again, obviously it did not work for everyone. Which to me, I always wonder, like, why that is, what the problem might be. And I guess to a certain extent, it's just that Deku's story is essentially a test of your own cynicism. Because you kind of have to accept it. You kind of have just to accept, okay, this kid, he's hurt, he's insecure, and he's just, without perspectives. And your reaction to that, what Hori wants you to react to is, oh, fuck, man, that's kind of sad. I hope he gets to do it. And not the cynical reaction that some people have is like, man, that's so lame. Why am I watching a show about this guy?
Why am I watching this show? Yeah.
Which,
he's going for a very niche audience, surprisingly.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of like how he's presenting it, because he clearly like seems to understand this. Like, he talks about, like, I need to draw him plain, or I need to, or like, I tried to have him like kind of be a kind of a vehicle for like my own like self-confidence issues. And obviously all the things about him that are off-putting he doesn't have anymore, and he doesn't have them anymore not because Hori decided, oh, that's annoying, but because we actually see him gradually gain that confidence. Like, this is kind of a thing with a lot of My Hero characters. He really goes hard on the shonen version of them, right? Like, Kirishima's manly, Bakugo's angry boy, Deku's sad, cry boy. But these are all, like, besides, like, Kirishima, and that's, so I'll replace it with, like, Shigaraki. Shigaraki's, like, a lame villain who's, like, all this stuff. Sure, all that stuff can be really interesting, but it doesn't mean... But if you don't find it interesting and you don't find it compelling, it's just really annoying, because baseline as humans, we like seeing people be competent. We like seeing people be confident. We like seeing people being emotionally aware of themselves, or being able to have struggles, but they're overcoming them, and we see how good they're doing at it. Or if they're not doing so good at it, it's like something really drastic, like, my whole family was killed, and it's like, wow, I haven't had my whole family killed, how could I say that they're lame? But if you're someone who, you're not someone who feels insecure, or maybe you never went through that because maybe you were like the Chad jock or something like that, you're just like, dude, like, grow up, who cares?
Yeah.
And I do get it, I just don't relate because I love Deku. And I'll talk about why when I get to my turn.
Okay, well, I think you can have your turn now, because like I think Deku early on is very much just the big testing ground. It's very much just how much emotional sincerity can you bring up for a story that treats something this, superficially mundane, just, a bullied kid or whatever, with so much emotional sincerity itself. And I think that while that is a cool choice, and one that I massively appreciate, I can now in hindsight also see why people didn't like him. And like, his development, or like his growth throughout this first season, or these first couple of arcs, isn't like mind-blowing, but it's cool. Like, it's consistent. Like, he goes and becomes more and more confident as things go on, and you really get the sense that he was always like an actual competent kid that was just held back by no one believing in him, because the moment he gets to UA and has people who actually encourage him, he immediately becomes better. Like already the first like quirk apprehension test with like the little ball that he has to throw, like already there he starts being more creative and more like, I guess, raw when it comes to the use of his abilities. So yeah, I would say that's my bit on Deku.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I guess I should ask, because I know he was originally your favorite character in the series. Who's like your favorite character now? Because I would assume it's not Deku. It's probably like Shigaraki or Endeavor, right?
Yeah, it's a tie between the two, actually. Because I can't decide. I think Endeavor might inch Shigaraki out if Shigaraki keeps staying puppeted, because I really don't like that plot element anymore. I think we can move on from that. But at the time of recording this, it's Endeavor. Like,
well, I was gonna ask, like, where is Deku? Has he like dropped down to like 5 or 10, or he's not even on your 10, or he's like second or something?
No, I would say Deku is like number 4, maybe.
Okay, I was just interested in thinking about it.
Yeah, because the thing with Deku is I love his character development all the way up where he takes his big break as the protagonist.
So up through Culture Festival.
Yeah, pretty much. I still like it in Joint Training, and I still like it in the little bits of Endeavor Agency, but
he's just not the focus anymore, and he
isn't the focus anymore, and his character feels very stagnant as a result of it.
Yeah, whereas, like, while people would like to say that he doesn't grow, like, he is constantly growing in the section of the story where he is the focus, like, constantly. And so yeah, when he doesn't, when we are in these situations where it's just like, Deku, just, like, get good at your power, and then it's off-screened.
yeah, it's just, it's unfortunate. It's very annoying.
Yeah, but, alright, so for me with Deku, what I just absolutely love about him is it goes all the way back to the scene where I first fell in love with him, which was during the sports festival, where it wasn't the fight itself, because sure, I thought it was really cool that he was like using his fingers and like the countdown, and then like, oh, he broke his broken finger, he's raw, all that stuff. But the moment that like basically like broke me on his character and being like, oh my gosh, he's so amazing, is when he he's fighting Todoroki, and obviously he comes in because he wants to win. The story perfectly sets up his desire to fulfill his function as All Might's successor. He needs to say, "I'm here," blah, blah. So we have really good emotional stakes for what he needs to do. And when All Might says, "Young Midoriya, don't tell me you were trying to save young Todoroki this whole time," I was just like, oh. I was like, oh, so I'm the asshole. Because I was just like, that's so amazing that it's not like he's like just talking. He's actively like breaking his body over and over. And at a certain point, we can't really tell. He goes from "I'm here to win" to this person, like, he needs help, and I'm trying to help him by literally destroying myself and trying to, like, just help him come out of his shell. And when I saw that, it just, like, my heart melted for him, because I was just like, that's what a hero is. It's someone who is so selfless in that way. And I felt like, and as the series progresses, and he's helping Koda, who's a kid who he, like, doesn't care about him at all, or when he's helping Eri, like, the story, I felt like, and I especially felt this on reread, which is why I told you, like, I cried, and I always cry rereading this, is because I feel like Deku's embodiment of heroism, and I do feel like I'll probably always feel this way, is Deku as a character feels like the only superhero I've ever read about who I feel like they would save me too. Like realistically, and of course, any superhero is going to save you. That's their character. But it felt like Deku doesn't know half these people. Deku has no ability or skill to do this. And not only that, he has the best ability. And the point of his heroism and the way he uses it is that if he's the self-sacrificing character, he has all the power, but he has to use it on himself to save you. He has to kill himself actively, self-sacrifice just by fighting in order to protect you. And in order to help you at least a little bit longer, he has to basically like dumb down his power just so he can survive a little bit longer. But he will sacrifice his life for just some kid he doesn't even know. He will break his whole body just to help some kid who looks really sad. He will do all these things. And so what made me cry in this read through of this first chapter is the moment when he's like, surely a hero will come, blah, blah, blah. And he sees that beautiful spread of like Bakugo's like scared face, and he runs to help him. And it's the moment when he's running, he's scared. He doesn't have like this determined face or anything. He's just running. And Bakugo says like you, why? And it gives you all these list of reasons that he could feel this way. He's like, there were probably many reasons. And it's like all these things. Some of them are like to spite Bakugo. Some of them are inspirational words he heard. Some of them are based on tragic words he heard. And then it just finishes off and he's like, but in that moment. And then he goes, Kachan, you just looked like you needed saving. And I'm like, oh, like, no. My heart, just because it's just this, like, yeah, it's because people who criticize Deku in this situation, they say like, oh, like he could have gotten all those heroes killed, and like, you know, you have Gentle who did get people hurt because of the same actions that Deku's doing. But the point isn't that Deku was being like, this is my plan, I'm gonna save Bakugo, blah blah blah. His feet moved on its own. He didn't, you know, he doesn't like Bakugo. He's terrified, he's scared. But simply because he saw the scared boy crying, he thought, he looks like he needs help, and I want to help. And not even I want to help, he just did help. And so that's what eventually just got to me. And it's why, like, when All Might says, like, it's basically Deku's character in a nutshell, and it's what MHA does so well, where it's like these little things of like, Deku didn't come in and be like, oh, chapter blah 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 of my notebook, and then actually save Bakugo. He was pretty much worthless. All he did was like throw a can in his eye, and then Bakugo could breathe a little bit longer. But All Might ultimately had to do everything, and he's been called out this whole series that that's a bad way to go about things. But it's just the heart of the matter in the fact that because it's so pure, because he's so weak, and he's this perpetual underdog, and even when he gets his power, he still is not good at it, and that makes him feel even worse, because he's like, dude, I'm One Punch Man. Why can't I just be One Punch Man? But the fact that, and so I have to One Punch Man myself. Gosh dang it. because that's his character. There's just always this, he just always embodies a hero. He is self-sacrificing to the max, to his own self-detriment, to his own future being cut short. And it's the little things and the big things that come together to make him, I just think, so resonant for me. And it's why, like, he's my favorite character. So, and I think that heart of it just travels through this whole thing with like him being like, I cheated, like I'm blessed, like I didn't deserve this, and all these things that I think most people call him out for. He understands those things, and I don't think it comes off like Horikoshi trying to like cover his butt and be like, oh no, don't worry, I understand the story I'm writing. Like, it feels sincere and it feels genuine, And I think the art helps that. I think the voice acting helps that, and I just think his design and how plain he works helps that. And I just think his whole character is just so expertly crafted. And throughout all these chapters, no matter what I was reading, I was always invested in that, even down to when he jumps in the way to save All Might from Kurogiri, and he's like, once again, I literally couldn't do anything. Like, I broke my legs and my arms. He's like, that's not true. For that 1 second you bought me, you saved me once again. And he cries, and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm just so happy you're alive. So, yeah, I just love Deku. Sorry I wrote 20 essays there.
It's okay.
I hope I conveyed it properly, because he's my favorite character, and I've always wanted to write a video about him, but I always feel like I don't know how to do it justice, so I hope I got some of it out there.
I think so. I understood what you were talking about, and I hope the lovely people at home, who surely have watched all of it so far and haven't skipped ahead,
or haven't rage quit because we didn't say it was 10 out of 10 GOAT from the start.
Well, My Hero is looking to settle at a comfortable 8 out of 10 for me if it keeps going at the pace it is. So,
That's fair.
Yeah, it has 10 out of 10 elements. It has, I think the worst thing I would rate it maybe a 5. So, it's just a good show. It's a very good show that I love a lot, with some of my favorite shit in it. But anyway, that's for another day.
Well, and ultimately, with any story, you don't want to be the guy who just, all I consume is One Piece and Dragon Ball. Not because those things are bad, but because it's dude, there's so much art that's been created for you. Eventually, of course, you're going to find more things that, they just skew just a little bit more into the niche or the thing that comforts you or really likes. And yeah, I don't expect that by the time My Hero ends that I'm gonna want to go back and reread all of it and be as invested. But those moments that hit me and have really shaped my opinion on it, I will most definitely go back to those things. Why wouldn't I? That kind of thing. So, but we talked about that. So,
all right. In that case, the next character we have is Bakugo, which we've actually
we can kind of skip him.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Bakugo. Yeah. Go away. Aizawa, which you have had a journey with this character, haven't you?
Yes.
So do you just want to take this section away? Because I did not have many thoughts on him this time around. He was cool, but his presence is very understated. He's just a mean teacher who actually cares a lot. Yeah, and he's just funny and cool. And that's kind of it.
He definitely Horikoshi definitely leaned in on the hobo aspect of him. His facial hair looks so ugly in the manga, which I kind of like. It actually kind of works really well. But he definitely starts off as he's supposed to look ugly to now he's sexy hobo. Everybody loves him or whatever with how he looks. But yeah, and he kind of lightens up on the facial hair. But yeah, with Aizawa, I'll keep it pretty quick. Just basically, early on, I just didn't really care for him too much. I've never really been someone who gets into the cool sensei teacher, which I don't really know why. I guess I just need something quirky about him, cause I like All Might as a mentor. But yeah, Aizawa just for me never really resonated at all. Once I hit the work, I really started to. And we got his backstory with Shirakumo, I really started to reflect on his relationship with his kids and how that's kind of always been there. Even though, because people will point out, how can you take anything he says seriously, when he says, oh, he's going to expel you, whenever, he never does, and he's a very big softy. But it's I think when, you get your face smashed in by a monster and he protects you from near death, even though he knows he can't fight you, that, I'd have respect for him. Regardless of if he never actually follows through with, you're all expelled, you're not going to summer camp, blah, 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 blah. But I think just what I most liked about him this time around is, with the Shirakumo backstory, adding to it, whenever we have him talking to Deku, it feels like he's talking to his old friend, because the way he describes his old friend is that he was always rushing into things. He had a good personality to be a hero, but he didn't have the skill. And so when you see Deku and you see him being so harsh and frankly unreasonable, he's kind of cartoonishly bad as a teacher. Because let's think about this for example. He's saying Midoriya, control your quirk. Oh, you can't? Well, leave. It's dude, you're the teacher. Teach him how to use his quirk. And or even after the test with Bakugo and Deku fighting, his literal advice to Deku is, Deku, I heard you messed up your body again. Fix that. It's like, well, how? Like, how do you want him to do that? So, like, he's pretty terrible in that aspect early on. I think he gets much better as, like, a mentor figure later on. But I think just overall, that elevates it. And I think the best part about him is that Horikoshi retconned his expels every kid shtick. Because, one, it makes no sense how he's still teaching here if he's actively taking away students from what is considered the best hero school. And he's just, like, cutting them off. Like, that makes zero sense that they would still have him around. And two, like, I think I checked the amount, and it's like 260 or something. It's like, if you did that, that means, like, you've had, like, no classes. And, like, how does this, like, logically work out? So, like, the fact that Horikoshi retconned it and made it to where it's like, oh, no, he never expelled people, I think functions better with his tsundere aspect. Because otherwise, it just feels like he's this hardened teacher, except now when he's never a hardened teacher and he never follows through on any of his threats. So just like retroactively making it that he's always been kind of like I'm grumpy but I love you all, I think just smooths him out better. And of course, I think my favorite line of his is there's, and this comes across even when you don't know his backstory, is he says like if he had no potential, I would have expelled him, because there's nothing crueler than letting someone chase their half-baked dream. And I think, one, that's a great line, and two, I just think that regardless of being like a tsundere, like, ooh, I secretly like you, I think that is just very respectable as a teacher. The fact that, sure, his methods are very unreasonable, but you can tell it comes from a place of someone who has seen people fall and seen how that breaks them, so I might as well cut them loose when I think it's time. And so I like that. So overall, I thought he was good. I think he's elevated in the anime, obviously. They extend his fight scene. He has a really good voice actor. They clean up his character design early on. So yeah, just cool. I was glad to have him around. And of course, obviously, I'm having more appreciation for him because I've grown to like him in the recent arcs. So obviously, that's affecting it. Once I mellow out and like, I'm just like, yeah, I like Aizawa, I'm sure it'll be much more like, oh, this is his character. Whereas now I'm like, oh, now I like him more because I have perspective, which is an outside influence,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. But,
so that's it for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the beauty of being able to reread these things, like literally at a moment's notice. Because you can get like such a new angle on it, depending on the headspace you're in at the time. Because obviously right now, the war arc and his relation to Shirakumo, they're so present in our minds because they were just recently reinvoked. So, like, it's definitely cool that you can get different perspectives and different interests out of rereading this opening act, basically, depending on where you are right now, just with your mind. So, yeah, I'd say that's Aizawa in the bag.
And now it's just like a quick fire, like, I don't plan to spend like too much time on this, like we'll wrap up soon, but I wanted to talk about the kids, just because I think it's fun to track what Horikoshi had planned and what he didn't have planned. And just also, like, did any of them stand out to you? I think the biggest disappointment for me was that, Tsuyu was everybody's best girl back in season 1, right? And it was probably just because she was the only girl with any, like, consistent competency, and, like, she had, like, a weird personality and ribbit, all that stuff. Yeah. But, like, it's really weird. Like, I always remembered, like, oh man, she's really good in USJ, and maybe she is a lot better in the anime, but in the manga, she's just there.
Yeah, she's just hanging out. Like, of the girls, no one really makes a big impression. Like, it's crazy how basically Mina and Jiro's entire characters basically only exist because of how the anime interpreted it. Because in this manga, they are very low key. They are like the lowest of keys in how they're presented. Yeah.
And, like, voice acting helps, too, because, like you're saying, like, the anime kind of understood that, oh, Mina's kind of like this Genki girl, like, she's very energetic. But if you're reading in the manga, like, sure, she has, like, this toothy grin all the time, which is really cute. She looks kind of ugly, but, like, in a good way. Like, she doesn't have the pristine anime girl complexion yet. She kind of looks like a freaky alien queen. But they definitely caught on sooner than I think most people would that, oh, she has this energetic personality, so they gave her, like, this very bubbly voice. And then same with Jiro, where they kind of gave her, like, this more mellow monotone. Whereas I feel like if you're reading this, you would just maybe see her as more like a punk, I guess. So yeah, a lot of the side cast, because we're not focusing on them, don't really make themselves noticed. Like, even Todoroki for the fact, even like that's also a part of the anime of people being like, whoa, it's Todoroki. In the manga, like, sure, he's like freezing people, but we're not getting the giant ice wall spreads that would make you go like, oh my gosh, you know?
Yeah.
He's just kind of there.
Yeah, also his costume is so stupid. Like, Todoroki's first costume has to be one of Horikoshi's dumbest designs. And that includes jumpsuit Deku. Like, he looks so dumb with that stupid fucking ice block stuck to the side of his head with a glowing red eye. And, like, I know that people have said, oh, you know, he wanted to cover up the part of him that is Endeavor. And I'm willing to believe that was Horikoshi's design intention.
I do think that's the joke, yeah.
Yeah, but, like, man, I'm glad he dropped it because it's so stupid. Like, he just looks... He looks like half dried up in the manga. Because, of course, this was before Horikoshi really started shading ice in, like, you know, a refractive manner. So it just looks like he's cracking. Like, it's just a crack
He's
statue.
very flat. He's very flat in all the scenes he's in.
Yeah.
Visually.
And as far as the other characters concerned, none of them make, like, a big splash. Like, they are all very, very basic character outlines at this point. Like, Ida, maybe, is another character that really stands out just because he actually has a back and forth. Like, you know, he's, oh, Deku, you stink. And then he's like, oh, Deku, you're actually really cool. Let's be friends. And then it's like, oh, I can't lead people. Wait, I can. And that's kind of it. But, it's more than most of these characters get.
He actually has an arc, surprisingly. Yeah. And I guess that's another fascinating thing about looking back on this is like when you're first reading these things, if you catch on to those things, it feels like I don't know, at least to me, whenever I was able to notice like, oh, Kirishima's like a really good guy, huh? Because he's like this big like muscly guy, but he's like, oh, I'm kind of insecure about my power. And then when Deku breaks his legs, and he's like, oh, Deku, you know, I'm coming to help you. I was like, dude, that's awesome. Like, Todoroki and Bakugo are just standing there. Deku's got broken legs, and this kid who, like, he's not a main character as far as I know, he's coming to help. Heck yeah, I like that dude. And so when you discover those things and you attach yourself to this character so early on, it's very easy to like hype up those moments as more to yourself than they are, because you're just like, oh, I see that there's a character there. But like when you're rereading it and you know what Kirishima becomes, which is like much grander and much greater and much cooler, then it's just like, oh, he's here. Like it doesn't feel like, oh, this is a big Kirishima is a good boy moment. It just feels like, yeah, that's Kirishima. He's doing his thing. Which is just interesting. Like I think that's just interesting about stories, and I don't know if that's... I know it's not unique to MHA, but I wonder if that's something that... I know, like, you're really in love with, like, Jujutsu Kaisen right now. I really love Chainsaw Man, and just a lot of these new series. I am really interested to see if, like... Because My Hero was my first manga. I'm really interested to see if that carries over to a lot of other stories I read, or maybe, like, Attack on Titan. Like, if I go back to the earlier stuff, am I going to be as invested in base level Eren or base level... Denji as I am of where they become. So that was just a little thing I thought of. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that idea.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up Attack on Titan, because that's probably, in my opinion, the series that gets the most difference out of reading it the first time versus rereading it, just because of how much that series loves to spin itself on its head. Regardless of whether you like that or not. I think it's, once you get, like, it's kind of how what we talked about earlier with once you hit peak MHA, you can't reread this stuff with the same mindset you had the first time around. And Attack on Titan is another great example of that. Like, you really, really cannot... you can't really see Eren, like baby Eren, in the same light you did the first time you watched it. After you've, read chapter 122, or even the final chapter, 139. So,
yeah.
It's...
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it is a phenomenon that all stories will have to a certain extent if they just keep going for long enough. But I think it's a good exercise to like actually experience that that phenomenon for yourself, especially with a story you're very invested in, like we are with MHA. But aside from that, I don't think I have anything to add.
Yeah, one final thing I'll say is I think it's really, really cool that everything about Kirishima was already planned. You can actually see his flashback design in the entrance exam,
Mm-hmm.
like where he has the down black hair and the black coat. And
Mm-hmm.
this isn't even like a theory of like people being like, oh, maybe that's his design. No, like Horikoshi explicitly says he's in the background of that chapter. You can see that it's the same thing. The character, whenever he shows like people gaining points, he shows Ida, important character,
Mm-hmm.
Bakugo, important character, Uraka, important character, and then in the back, and then a panel dedicated to some guy in the background cutting down a robot with his hands.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Oh,
him.
yeah. Okay.
That's there. That's there. I love that his scar thing was always planned, because in the volume, which is like volume 3 or whatever, he's like, yeah, he cut it when he was little. I love that his insecurities about his quirk are established early on. I love that whenever he jumps in to fight Kurogiri, he's like sweating and he like genuinely looks scared. And throughout the rest of the thing, he continues to have this scared look on his face, which goes into his whole thing of like, when you're not paying attention, you think like, oh, Kirishima's like so cool. He jumped in to fight the villains. He must be fearless. But really, he's terrified, and that's why he jumps in. Like, all this stuff is there, and I was just like, whoa, that's so cool. like just being able to catch it all. So, I think
Actually, now that you mentioned Kirishima, I want to mention one more thing, which is not necessarily, well, this isn't really Horikoshi, but this section of the manga is also infamous because it has so many weird translation errors. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know what scene you're talking about. Go ahead.
yeah, this and the Stain arc, I think, are the ones that just get the weirdest and most inconsistent translations. And I don't know if this was just because at the time they didn't really, Wiz wasn't really sure how many resources to dedicate to this.
But this is really janky.
Yeah, there's one scene that you pointed out to me that I'm trying to find right now where
Are you talking about the Kirishima one?
yes, where Kishima talks nonsense.
Yeah, because I will grab it, because it's literally the most incoherent thing I've ever read. And it was I forgot to bring it up, but maybe it will turn out that if I go to the anime and I read the dialogue, like Bakugo actually will come across. Like, maybe, because here's the thing, everybody who ever says like, oh, I get Bakugo or whatever, I've seen it from like the anime and like a few people. So maybe the anime just had better dialogue that kind of expressed that nuance. But the manga, at least in this early part of the Viz translation, does not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of weird shit. But what chapter is the thing you're referring to?
It is, I'm almost to it. Okay, it's chapter 17, game over. So, do you want me to just read it?
Yeah, sure, read it. Let's see if we can figure it out.
Okay, so, So, Bakugo says, so Kirishima says, he's how the blah blah blah. He's how these punks are getting around. Bring him down, and they'll have nowhere to run. That's Bakugo. And then Bakugo says, it's not like I don't have a way to beat him. He takes down the chameleon guy. He goes, if they're sending against us, if all they're sending against us are these idiots, we should be fine. And and this is after Kirishima had said, like, we should go help our friends.
Mm-hmm.
So Kirishima says, you sure are calm all of a sudden. And he goes, I'm always calm, you damned broomhead. And he goes, there it is. So then Bakugo says, I'm out of here. And Kirishima says, hold up. You gotta trust your pals. Be a man, Bakugo. You've convinced me.
Yeah, it's three,
What?
it's like 3 turns of opinion in like 2 speech bubbles. It's so great.
Yeah, and I know what, because I've seen the anime, I know what it's supposed to be, and I checked the sub as well before I started this, because, like, I was trying to remember if, like, maybe it was just the dub, but no, it's in the sub. It's basically that Bakugo is saying, Bakugo says, like, oh, if they're sending small fries like these, those people shouldn't have to worry. Like, we shouldn't have to worry about going after our classmates. And then Kirishima says, oh, so what I think you're really saying is that you trust our classmates. That's thinking like a man, Bakugo. I'll follow you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So he's trying. The point is that Bakugo is, because this is also after he said, like, aren't you usually like angry all the time? So basically, he's like, oh, okay, like this is how this is the Kirishima Bakugo relationship where like Bakugo screams like a dog and then Kirishima translates. Yeah, and so he's just like, oh, if you're saying that all these people are weak and that are that we don't need to go after our friends, what you're really saying is that you trust them and that we're good to go. That's manly.
Uh-huh.
But the manga does not come across that way.
Yeah, it's very jank, and the early chapters have a couple of examples like that. I think the worst one though does not happen in this section, and rather happens in the Stain arc, which is of course when Stain says, "I have to reclaim my hero status," as opposed to I have to
Reclaim the status of a hero.
Yeah, I have to like make a hero mean something again, which is interesting because that, like, I don't know why Wiz doesn't fix these things, because they have the means to do it. Like, you can just reprint things, and they have fixed things in reprints before. But some of these just stick around, and it's really
Or at the
bizarre.
very least, do it in the digital, right? That should take no time, right?
Yeah,
Like, maybe you don't want to print a bunch of new books or whatever. But like, at least, like, I still think they haven't updated the concert chapter.
Really? On the
on the Viz app.
That's so annoying.
I'm pretty sure. It's 182 if you want to check.
Yeah, but that's so weird because like when the whole Maruta thing happened with the doctor, they switched that within a day.
Changed that.
Yeah.
They changed Bakugo's hero name.
Yeah, so clearly it's possible. I mean, Wiz is one of those companies that's really hard to gauge because I know people who work there and they're all very passionate and very like knowledgeable on what they're doing. So I don't know why there's always this like sneaking undertone of half-assing things.
Yeah, and once again, don't go after translators. As Caleb Cook has stated, most of the stuff you read is not his original draft, because he will, like, he's the translator for My Hero, which he left Twitter because people were, like, just coming at him being like, how dare you write it this way? How Endeavor wouldn't say the shit.
Yeah.
You know, like, ridiculous stuff, and it's just terrible. But, but like, he said, like, most of the stuff you read is not what I originally had, and I'm just as frustrated with you as sometimes with what comes out, but it goes through me, it goes through an editor, it goes through Japan, like the people who own My Hero, and then it comes back. So, like, it's nothing I can do.
Yeah, like, I mean, I've said this many times, I'm going to say this again. Do not, like, go after individual peoples in the pipeline of localizing manga or any industry. Like, this is a product complaint. Take it up with Wiz, the company, and their customer services. Don't go on Twitter and add like a letterer or a translator, because as you just said, Ian, these people work in chains of in chains of production that we just cannot really like accurately understand without being behind the scenes ourselves. And really, it's just stupid to try and pin any like ill will on anyone.
Yeah, it's like when you've never worked in fast food and you like get grumpy about your food, and then you work at fast food and you're like, oh, I'll be patient.
Yeah,
it's just a perspective a lot of people don't have.
Yeah, like it's just one of those things where just if you don't know the industry, just go through the official channels, go through the customer service, and leave the individuals the fuck alone. That's basically it.
Yeah.
And with
I don't think I have anything else.
Yeah, I think with that we can actually close out. Any final statements on this section of the story, the beginning of My Hero Academia?
I would say overall, the heart of My Hero has stayed consistent from the start, and I think it's just as strong as it is now. Honestly, right now it might be a bit weaker just in terms of like immediate moment. Not being as into it as I am because we're focusing on other characters. But I think that the heart of My Hero is portrayed very well. I think that, but I think that the moment to moment and just like the framing around it, it's nothing about it feels like it's going to appeal to a very wide audience, which of course, while niche stuff is perfectly fine, I totally understand where a lot of these complaints are coming from. Whereas before, I would always kind of like, I would strawman those people. I'd be like, oh, how do you not get Deku? Or, oh my gosh, you think this? Do you not have a brain? You know? But coming back and reading this, while I still love it, My Hero is still my second favorite series, and I still love this opening section, and the things I care about are still intact. I get it. Like, I understand that this, there are either problems here, or there are just things that are not broadly appealing. And I think that's fine. So I think it was actually a really healthy experience, because I think it's going to help me just going into other things and basically just calm me down. Like I know like like a year ago I would be like on Twitter being like, how do people not recognize that in this panel in the corner of the screen, the nuance of this facial expression, like because I'm so invested in the characters that I think it's obvious, but having fallen in love with things like Chainsaw Man, where I'm not into it for the deep stuff, I'm into it for the surface level stuff, and I like the deep stuff too, but I'm in it for these different things. I think it has been really good to go back to this. So as far as rating goes, I wasn't originally going to rate this section, but I think it's probably good to do so. I would probably give probably around a 6. I think it's above average, this section of the story. I think that the first chapter, like I legitimately do still think it's a 10 out of 10. I don't think Corey could have wrote the goal of what he's going for better. And obviously it hits me, so it hits both subjectively and also subjectively from like I can understand other people. So 6 out of 10 for this section of the story. First chapter is a 10 out of 10. I love Deku, and I can't wait to do this more with you, man.
Same, man. I love doing this with you, but it's interesting to bring up the first chapter because I think it was the other day where I was thinking, imagine like being there in 2014, hearing that there is this new shonen coming out, and reading the first chapter. The first chapter is that, like, oh my god, because that first chapter, I completely agree. Like, that is such a strong start, and like that is maybe one of the best first chapters I've read in anything, because everything is on point. It still holds up. Yeah, everything is on point. So yeah, I'd say 6 out of 10 is actually really reasonable for this section, because like it has the seeds for everything that would eventually make MHA as good as it is, but they're just seeds, and when looked at in isolation without the knowledge of what comes later, it really is just a slightly seasoned chicken breast of shonen, which, you know, is fine. It's fun, and the beginning is awesome. So, you know, yeah, 6 out of 10 is probably good. And above average. I would probably read it again, but not on its own. Not like, oh, I'm gonna reread the Camino arc. It'd probably just be like, I'm gonna reread My Hero, you know, and I'm not gonna be dreading reading it, you know. Yes, this isn't the summer exam arc. I don't dread reading it.
Oh boy, I can't wait to talk about everything bad with that arc.
That arc is so terrible.
And how the anime was just like, don't worry, I will shoulder this burden.
Oh yeah, remember when the My Hero anime was actually like good and improved the material? Those are wild days.
Oh man. Here's the thing. Man, would it be like heart-shattering to like, because I'm assuming that neither of us have actually rewatched season 1 or 2 since they like came out, or at least a year after they came out in a while.
No, I rewatched season 1 and 2. I rewatch all of MHA almost yearly, actually.
Okay, so you know for certain, because I'm like, man, how embarrassed am I going to be if I go back to season 2 and it has all the same problems except for the cool episodes, which is literally what season 4 was, which is that it sucks most of the time except for the cool episodes.
Well, my last rewatch for seasons 1 and 2 must have been, let me think, last October-ish or something. Because the thing is, I always find new people to force to watch MHA with me, and then I just rewatch it. And I've managed to do that once almost every year for the last, like, 5 or so years. And from what I remember now immediately, season 1 and 2, they still suffered from some of the issues that the other seasons do. Like, for example, MHA has never been well-directed outside of, like, exceptional moments. It all looks very flat. But
the backgrounds are terrible. But, you know, there was more intent behind it especially in season 2. Like, you'd feel that every episode they wanted to evoke a specific feeling, and the episodes were consistent within that feeling. Like, it almost felt like every episode was a 20-minute topic discussion in a way. Like, was internally consistent. And sometimes things shuffled around as opposed to how they were in the manga. That's fine. Season 2 even had, like, a completely anime original Endeavor fight that showed off his abilities years before they would show up in the manga, which is bonkers. Please think about this, manga fans. If you were manga only and you never went to the anime, you would not see Endeavor fight once until his fight with the High End.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is insane. So that means that the whole time they're telling you he's the number 2 hero, you just have to go off tell, don't show, basically.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. But I know that everybody in their head inserts the season 2 fight scene as like this is how you know he's the number 2 hero. And it's crazy to me to think that doesn't exist in the manga.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that was added. And that's kind of the thing with season 2 especially, but also season 3. Like, there are additions, there are changes, but they're always consistent with what the show wants to do. But season 4 onwards, and even season 3 already, you start feeling like there's that one filler episode where they promote the movie. And you just start getting this feeling like, okay, they're kind of, like, no disrespect to the studio, no disrespect to the animators and the people working on it. But you do kind of get the sense that it's being produced, in a factory now. Like, it's just a transport belt anime adaptation at this point, and there's very little vision behind it. Like, if you compare your average season 4 episode with your average season 2 episode, just in terms of what they cover and how they cover it, it's such a stark difference. Like, in season 2, you get episodes like where Deku talks to Shoto about, like, where they have their talk, and Shoto's like, "Are you All Might's love baby?" That episode really covers mundane content, all things considered, but it's done with like an actual intent to like show both Todoroki's suffering and Deku's determination despite that suffering.
And like atmosphere, and like it has like a perfect tone, and like the music's actually on point. Did you know that in this recent episode they used the villain theme, like the second villain theme, like the rah, rah. They used it in the Class B fight for Class B showing up to fight the kids.
Oh, cool. Great.
And it's like, here's the thing, like, some people are going to say, like, what are you talking about? That's stupid. It's just a song. It's like, no, basically what it's doing is it's breaking down motifs. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the villain theme. So when you hear it, you're supposed to think, oh, it's the villains. But no, we have this screamo death rock song being played during what is a very low stakes arc of just these kids doing things. And wouldn't it make more sense to make it more fun, or like have it be like more zany or something? Or, it could still be a shock, but I'm just like, why would you play the villain? It's lessening the value of the villain theme. Because like, oh, you just play it anywhere. Who cares?
Yeah, and like the music placement especially, I think, has taken the heaviest hit, and I don't understand why, because the person doing it hasn't changed.
Well, that's not his job to... you mean to put it or to make it?
The placer, no.
He's not changed.
Yeah, Yuki Hayashi, his tracks are perfect. They're what MHA should sound like, but it should sound like that at different points in time.
Or you should use his music. I don't know if anyone knows, or a lot of your fans know this. Overhaul has like 2 themes that just aren't in the anime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that Yuki Hayashi made a song called Deku vs. Bakugo Part 2. So, you might think that would go in the one place that it's meant to go. Nope, it goes into the Mirio versus Class 1A fight. What? He made a song that mixes the 2 themes of your main characters in like this operatic, like orchestral amazingness, and you put it when Mirio is being goofy punching kids while naked? What is happening?
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Like, the music placement has been bad since like the end of season 3. And I don't understand why, because that's the job of the director. And the director has changed. Like, it's gone from Nagasaki to Mukai. But it's been equally bad, so it must be someone else doing it. So, like, I don't get what the problem is, because, like, you mentioned Overhaul. So Overhaul has one theme that actually made it into the anime, which is, like, that trap beat Yakuza music.
Yeah.
It is used for the first time in the filler episode about where they have to find out that love actually saves everything. And also, please go watch the movie.
And I don't think it ever is used for him.
It is a few times, actually.
Okay.
It is used when the whole concept of Yakuza is first introduced. But yeah, like, the music placement in MHA has gone from godlike to literally terrible.
And once in a blue moon, like the Overhaul fight and the Endeavor fight were like pitch perfect, and I'm like, how did you make this?
Yeah.
Why is this like a movie now? What?
Yeah, and direction as well is so... I mean, I've said it before. Why did we spend the Overhaul arc in a dingy fucking basement labyrinth when it's just lit like it's fucking Monday afternoon. Like, there's just no will to make these scenes look interesting. They just want to adapt the manga and nothing else. And you could say, okay, well, that's what an anime does, but no. Look at something.
No.
Look at something like Jujutsu Kaisen, or look at the first season of Attack on Titan, who massively elevated the source material in meaningful ways. Have you ever read like the early portions of Attack on Titan?
I've seen it. Like, whenever I see people post and, like, I've skimmed through it. Like, I know what it looks like.
Well, yeah, it's not just the look. Like, the season 1 restructured entire arcs to make them flow better.
And made it better, I would assume.
Yeah, because in basically in season 1 of the anime of Attack on Titan, you get the kids, shit happens to them, and then you get the arc of them, like, learning to become better, and then they get fucked up in their first fight. In the manga, you see the kids get fucked up in, like, that first chapter, and then it skips to them already being, like, half adults and then getting fucked up in their first fight, and then it flashbacks to how they got to be adults and fighting fit.
Oh, yeah, that wouldn't flow as well, probably.
It's terrible. And, like, you know, My Hero used to do the same thing with the summer exams, which in the manga I would consider borderline unreadable at times, whereas the anime made it really enjoyable. And here we are, 5 seasons in, and when they change things, it's objectively always for the worse. Like, I'm sorry, I can't remember the last good change that the anime did, especially if you're talking about, like, season 4. Like, all it did was adapt the source material well.
The only thing I think that they definitely made better is they elongated the scene where Deku climbs the pillar to get Eri. Like, in the manga, it's not really about that. It's mostly like the narrator, which they cut, but they have the narrator talking and, like, it's flashing between a bunch of other things. But in, like, the anime, they give you, like, a vocal track of Yusei run, and, like, it actually feels like we're saving Eri. Like, it's a big deal. Like, we've come this far. We're moving towards the light. Like, I would say that change elevated it, but, like, everything else, I agree.
Yeah.
It's either just, like, doing it, like, that is a change, I think, but, like, everything else is just, like, I love the Endeavor fight, but it's not like they changed something, they just did it really well.
Yeah, and it's like, again, you could say that's all it has to do, it's just an adaptation, but an adaptation is not just, here's the manga but with movement. An adaptation is a new creative vision being applied onto a piece of work. Like, again, look at all the, like, really good anime adaptations that we've had over the years. Look at stuff like One Punch Man and stuff like Attack on Titan and, now also Jujutsu Kaisen. Like, they understand the source material and make changes where it is appropriate because these are different mediums. But MHA, and it's now, been very well known, the anime staff uses the manga as the storyboard for most of the time. And it's like, yeah, of course it's going to look really bland and awkward for most of the time because you're trying to convey, like, a written page one-to-one in movement, and that just does not translate well. Like, you can, especially in season 4, I have not started watching season 5 yet, but especially in season 4, you can literally see where the anime switches from using the manga as a storyboard to using unique storyboards, because those are all the moments that are actually good. So, yeah, but this was
just have, like, a guest animator who just, like, does whatever they want.
Well, that as well, or they have, like, star episodes, like the Endeavor fight, which, that was great, and I do think that, I mean, we've said this before, whoever decided that the sky was purple, I love you. That was so good.
Like, I don't know why they fired you immediately afterwards, and they were like, all right, back to boring blue sky. But, you did your job, and I salute you. Even though you're probably the same person making these bad decisions. What is happening?
Yeah, like, it's so annoying as well, because, like, again, you're adapting something into animation. Have a vision. Have an idea of how you want to bring this to the table that isn't just making the manga move. Because if you look at season 1 and 2... they elevate so much of the source material just by adding more movement. They are adding more scenes. They're adding extra little flourishes and directive choices. There's just more to it. Like, the first 2 episodes of season 1 are so stylish compared to what comes immediately afterwards, even already. And especially compared to what comes after season 3. like it's just not very satisfying, which is also annoying because Mukai, the current director, the one who helms the anime ever since season 4 came out, he's good when he wants to be. Episode 1 of season 4 is a fucking filler episode, and it looks great. It has a wonderful storyboard. Honestly, the first 6 episodes of season 4 actually have very good individual storyboarded scenes. Deku's scene with Night Eye is super interesting in how it adapts the material. But everything in between is just not good. And it just gets worse over time. And then it gets good again for the big moments. But this was not part of our plan to discuss this.
I was going to say, I'm fine with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. But yeah, we should probably start wrapping up.
Yeah,
unless
exactly.
you have anything else you wanted to say.
No.
Yeah, I think, we both gave our final thoughts. So I guess, do you want me to just plug my channel?
Yeah, plug your shit and then we'll be out of here.
All right. So my channel's called IanWaffles. Haven't made too many videos, but I've made 2 videos on My Hero Academia, one on Overhaul and one on Eri, just kind of talking about how really good their characters are. And I plan to keep making stuff with Oceaniz as long as he'll have me.
Oh.
And I'm just really thankful for all you guys in the comments. You're always very, very sweet and kind and understanding. So thank you for having me, man.
Hey, man, thank you for being here. I always love talking to you about MHA. Your passion for the series is something I don't think it's difficult to find people who are passionate about things, but it's hard to find someone who's this passionate and also this capable at bringing it to the table in a way that my dumb lizard brain understands it. So
well, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So yeah, you'll be here as many times as MHA has arcs. I expect. So buckle up.
Heck yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you around. Take care and wash your hands. Bye-bye.
Bye.